Hey guys, today I'm going to be taking a look at Manjaro, the i3 edition. As you guys are probably familiar with, Manjaro really comes in three main flavors. If you go to the manjaro.org webpage and you go to download and click current releases, you have the Manjaro XFCE edition. This is really Manjaro's flagship product, the XFCE edition. But they also offer a KDE edition. As many of you know, I run the KDE edition of Manjaro on my main production machine as of right now. They also offer a Manjaro GNOME edition. And then they offer a minimal Manjaro Architect ISO where you build the system yourself. But also under downloads, you have community releases. And under community releases, you have a lot more options for desktop environments and window managers. For example, you have under community releases a Budgie edition, a Cinnamon edition, a Deepin edition, an i3 edition, LXDE, LXQT, and Mate. Today I'm going to be downloading the i3 edition. i3, the version number is 17.1.2, and I'm going to be installing this inside a virtual machine. Alright, so downloaded the ISO, and we're installing this inside VirtualBox. The ISO was 1.4 gigs in size, so not a very minimal ISO for being a minimal window manager like i3. Pretty big ISO, 1.4 gigs. But anyway, on to the installer here. Our boot menu here, we have time and time zone settings. We have our keyboard layout has already been chosen for English US, so that's great. Language, English US. Driver. The driver is set to free. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to choose non-free for drivers because I want the non-free drivers, you know, the proprietary third-party drivers. Then further down the menu, you have boot Manjaro i3. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that. That'll boot us directly into our live environment. From there, we should be able to find the installer. Alright, and the live desktop environment has finally loaded. And we have our Manjaro Hello greeter here with links to documentation such as the README, the release info, the Manjaro wiki. We have support options. We can go to their forums, their chat rooms, their mailing lists. We have project information, how to get involved with Manjaro development, and how to make a donation to the Manjaro project. And then in the center here we have launch the installer. So that's how we're going to launch the Calamaris installer, is what I'm assuming they use. That's what the other editions of Manjaro I've used in the past. The installer they used was the Calamaris installer. Before I launch that though, I want to mention a little something about this. The i3 window manager. I'm not familiar with i3 really at all. I have only used i3 one time in my life, and that was I did a review of a distro called ArchMerge. ArchMerge had the XFCE desktop environment, the OpenBox window manager, and the i3 window manager all installed on that particular distro. And I barely played around in i3 when I reviewed ArchMerge. I think I logged into it and spent maybe 2 minutes in the i3 session. Really, I was much more interested in the XFCE desktop environment for that review of ArchMerge, so I didn't spend a lot of time really in OpenBox, and I barely even scratched the surface on i3 when I reviewed ArchMerge. So this really is more of the first time I've ever looked at i3, so if I stumble around a bit, I apologize. I'm just not that familiar with the i3 window manager. I am, though, familiar with tiling window managers in general. I've used a lot of them in the past. I've lived in some of them for a while. Way back, many years ago, I used Awesome Window Manager for a while. I ended up leaving Awesome behind because back when I was using it, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, it seemed like every time Awesome did an update to a new version, it always broke the config files because you'd spend hours sometimes setting up these configs, getting the window manager set up just the way you like it, and then the next version broke all your configs and you'd have to start over. So that kind of put me off a little bit on the awesome window manager. So then I moved on to Xmonad, and I used Xmonad for a long time. In fact, even though I don't really live in Xmonad full time, I usually install the Xmonad tiling window manager on every machine that I install, just to have it, just because especially when you're running big desktop environments like GNOME, KDE, whatever, sometimes you can break those desktop environments. A big update to KDE comes out and say something breaks. Well, you can drop down in the TTY command prompt and fix your system from there, but it's nice to have a backup window manager or desktop environment, if you will. So especially a small one like Xmonad or OpenBox or i3 even, that you can log into and you can get some work done without having to drop all the way down into a command shell like the TTY terminal. So anyway, let's go ahead and run through the installer. And it is the Calamares installer. Still wanting to come back to that hello screen. I see. Because when you move the mouse over it, again, it's a tiling window manager, so anytime you move the mouse over the window, it brings it into focus, so I've got to be careful about that. Alright, the welcome screen, we already have language set to English US. I'm going to click Next. Time zone has been chosen correctly for me. Chicago in the US, Central Time Zone. English US has been chosen for the keyboard. That is correct. I can test it out in this test field. Alright, partitioning. I'm going to erase the disk and let Manjaro I3 have the entire 15 gig hard drive of this virtual machine. Alright, we need to create a username. I'm going to call this user Manjaro. I need to choose a password for that user. We have the option of logging in automatically without asking for a password. I'm not going to tick that on. We also have the option of using the same password for the administrator account. Basically, do you want your root password and your home user password to be the same password? Yes, I do. It makes it simpler. That way I don't have to remember two different passwords. All right, we have our review screen here. So location's correct, keyboard's correct, the partition scheme all looks good. I'm going to click Next. It's going to warn me it's about to format the drive right to the disk. I'm going to click Install now, and the installation begins. The install probably will take somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. I'll pause the recording. And the installation is completed. Now we need to go down here to the bottom left and tick on Restart Now. Click Done, and it will reboot your computer, and this will complete installation. I'm going to do that right now. And I've rebooted the machine, and we are launching our freshly installed Manjaro, the i3 edition. And let's see how long it takes for boot up. Okay, and we get to our login manager very fast. It looks like they're using the Light DM login manager. Type in my password. And here we are in Manjaro i3. And again, we are welcomed with the Manjaro Hello greeter here. We have the option of having it launch at startup every time we log in to i3, or we can slide that slider over, and now when we close it, this will never launch on startup again, so we'll never see this screen again. To close this window, again, I'm not familiar with i3, so I don't know some of the default key bindings, for example, how to close this window, but we have our little Conky system monitor here at the top. We have some system monitoring information here at the bottom left. We have key binding information, and to close a window, alright, to kill a focused window, Mod plus Shift plus Q. The Mod key. The Mod key is the Windows key on your keyboard, also called the Super key, is what most Linux folks call it, rather than calling it the Windows key. We like to call it the Super key. So Super, Shift, Q kills that window. Alright, then this window here that was behind it has to do with our Clipboard Manager. Clip it can save your history in a plain text file. If you copy, do you want to enable history saving? Sure, why not? So basically it was asking me permission to let the clipboard save some stuff to a plain text file. I gave it permission in case I want to use the clipboard. Alright, now where to get started in i3? Well, i3, if it's like any other tiling window manager I've ever used, a lot of the focus is going to be usually in text-based programs, terminals in particular. To launch a terminal, the default key binding to launch a terminal in most tiling window managers is the mod key, the super key. Super key plus the spacebar, or super key plus enter. Super key plus enter is what it is in this particular version of Manjaro i3. That gives us our terminal. If I hit super enter again, we will get a second terminal. Now you see the first terminal takes up 1/2 of the screen on the left. The second terminal takes up exactly 1/2 of the screen on the right. If I open more terminals, you see what's going on. We keep tiling, and then to close them, super shift Q. That's basically how tiling window managers work. Everything is keyboard driven. You really don't use your mouse really at all in a tiling window manager. Most of them have very little point and click functionality. For example, this bar at the bottom, this taskbar. I mean, you can click on anything you want, like the CPU symbol here, the hard drive space. This is some networking information. You can click on all of it. Nothing happens. The only things that clicking on do is the system tray icons here. You do have, our volume, system updater, networking stuff, and then this one over here is that the clipboard? Let's see what this is. Yep, that's the clipboard. Clip it. So other than these 4 icons here in the sys tray, nothing else is clickable on this taskbar. There's nothing to click on the desktop. Left clicking does nothing. Right clicking does nothing. So everything, again, is mainly keyboard driven with a tiling window manager. Now, normally when I review a distro, I go through its menu system and show you all the programs installed on it by default. This is going to be a challenge with something like a tiling window manager like i3 in this case, because there's no menu for me to go through. I have no idea what is installed for programs on this, and there are probably no way for me to easily discover all the programs installed by default on here. Looking at the copy here in the bottom left, we do have D menu installed by default. D menu is keyed to the super key plus D on the keyboard. So super D, and you see at the top we have run, colon, and then I could start typing something. It'll appear here, and then as I start typing, it'll start guessing the program we're looking for. For example, I'm assuming Firefox is probably the default browser. I could be wrong, but if I start typing Firefox, okay, Firefox is not here. Well, let's see. How about Chromium? Chromium is not on here either. What other web browser? But I just typed the word browser. Maybe something will come up. Default browser is an option. Let me run default browser. Type, background, terminal. That's interesting. Yeah, that didn't do anything. Oh, that did launch a browser. Okay. Pale Moon. Okay. Well, at least we figured out what browser we're using. This is the Pale Moon browser. I'm going to open D menu again. Super D. I'm assuming they have some kind of file manager installed by default. It may be a terminal-based file manager. That's what I would probably install if I was running i3. Ranger seems to be the most popular. And Ranger isn't, in fact, installed. This is the Ranger file manager. It's a terminal-based file manager. A pretty neat little, again, terminal-based file manager. But very easy to use, even if you're not, somebody that likes to play around with the keyboard. Ranger is very simple to navigate your way around in. Let's see what else is installed by default. Just some programs I can probably guess are installed by default. Again, Super D to launch D menu. I bet HTOP is probably on here. Yeah, it is. HTOP, of course, is a system monitor of sorts, a process viewing application. Move my head out of the way. So we have Ranger, we have HTOP. Let's see, what else? We probably have a graphical file manager. I bet Ranger is not the only file manager on here. I bet they included a graphical one. If I was going to include a GUI file manager, I would do a really lightweight one, such as PCMan-FM. So PCMan-FM. Yeah, PCMan-FM is also installed on here. So we have the Ranger file manager, the PCMan-FM file manager. HTOP was installed. I'm actually not sure what our default terminal is. Let me just mod key enter to get a default terminal. If I right click on it, yeah, it doesn't do anything for me. Let me just see if I can search for the default terminal in the D menu. So we open up the D menu again with Super D, and let's see if I can guess what terminal we're using. Looks like we have, by searching for the keyword term, looks like we have terminal, which I guess was just our default terminal. We have Xterm, UXterm, I3 Sensible terminal. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Let's launch it and see what it is. Yeah, it doesn't appear to be really anything. Let me close that. Let's see. Terminator is not found. Termite is not found. How about LX terminal? No. I'm not sure what our default terminal is. Alright, well, let's see. You know what? A better way of discovering some of the programs installed here on Manjaro i3 by default would probably be to look at the config files. So I'm going to do Super D again to do D menu. I know PCMan-FM is on here, so I'm going to open up the PCMan-FM file manager. I'm going to right click and choose to show hidden files and directories. There's a hidden directory here called .i3. In it is the i3 config file, and I'm going to open that up and move my head over here, and this is our configuration file for the i3 window manager. And let's see, just looking through this config, looks like we have ALSA mixer and Pulse Audio installed. The Pulse Audio volume control is installed because I see references to those programs here in the config file. Compton is our compositing program for our transparency and effects, so it's using the Compton compositor. Pale Moon, of course, is our web browser. We already figured that out. We also have both PCMan-FM and Ranger installed for file managers. Really, there's not much else as far as programs that are referenced in here. Let's see. Clip Grab, Calculator. So Calculator is our calculator. Gpart is also installed. LX Appearance. LX Appearance. Let me do the D menu again with Super D. LX Appearance. Hit enter. LX Appearance is the customized look and feel program to set your theme, your icons, your cursor. This is the standard customized look and feel program in the LXDE desktop environment, but most people also install this for minimal window managers such as OpenBox, i3, Xmonad. Let me close that. Alright, also we have Nitrogen installed for our wallpaper. We have Octopi. Pamac is also installed. Skype. Is Skype installed by default? Let me check that out. So Super D to get the D menu again. I'm going to type Skype. Now Skype is not installed by default, but there is a reference to Skype here in the config file, just in case you guys install Skype. It wants to make sure that Skype launches in a floating mode, so instead of a tiling mode. Because there's some programs you really don't want to tile the way we're tiling right now. For example, tiling really works well in terminals and in text editors. I got the text editor here. Why does tiling really make sense for text-based programs? Because text can wrap, right? If I start opening up more terminals here or more text editors here, let me close this. Let me open up a couple of terminals. So let me get some information showing on the terminal. For example, I start opening up a bunch of terminals. You know, this doesn't look too bad because text is variable. You know, it can wrap, the lines break. If we were looking at something like images in, I don't know, GIMP, Inkscape, any image viewer, photo manager, Shotwell, GwenView, anything like that, you would not want things like that to tile, because it's going to shrink those images. You know, they're not going to be the width you want. You know, a lot of times you want those things set the way you want them to sit. You don't want them to constantly be resizing and moving around on the desktop. So graphics and video are usually not great for tiling. Text-based programs, though, are fantastic for tiling. It really makes sense. If you live in a terminal or you live in your plain text editor, tiling windows make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, I've seen about all I can see here in the config file as far as some programs installed by default. You know what? I'm going to keep looking at the conky here at the bottom. We also have something called B menu. Not D menu, B menu. I've never heard of B menu. It is set, though, to mod control B. So super key control B. It gives me some new kind of menu. And we have options for hardware and drivers, printers, package manager, sound, time settings, file manager, search, display, appearance, network, configuration, task manager, browser, and a init system. So number 1 is hardware and drivers. If I hit 1 on the keyboard, we have options for installing a kernel, removing a kernel, using free graphics, using non-free graphics, list installed drivers, yada yada yada. You know what? How about choose number 4, use non-free graphics. It's going to ask me for a password. I'm going to give it my root password. Okay, and it's already installed the non-free graphics driver for me. You know what? I chose that in that initial boot menu during the install, so there was nothing to do there. But that's pretty cool that you have this menu to go through some of this stuff and get, you know, your drivers and probably your codecs and, you know, all that stuff installed here. Let's see if I can escape back out of this. Wrong option. Well, I do know Super Shift Q quits that program. You know what? I'm going to launch it again. Super Control B to go back to that B menu. And let's see. Number 5 is Package Manager. What does this do? Number 1, update system. 2, maintain system. 3, install packages. 4, remove packages and dependencies. 5, dependency tree. 6, reverse dependency tree. 7, list package files. You know what? Let's choose 7. And this lists, I guess, everything installed on our system. Surely this is not everything installed on our system. We don't have 0 AD installed on this system, do we? Super D to launch the D menu. 0 AD, yeah. So this is not programs installed on our system. This is package files that are available for us to install. This is files or packages in the repos. So this is just an easy way for us to search through the repos for stuff to install. See if I can get out of this. Let's see. Control C to quit. Okay. Alright, pretty cool. Number 1 would update the system. If I hit 1, it's going to ask me root password. Hit enter. There's nothing to do. The system's up to date. Yeah, so there's nothing to do here as far as the package management. So Super Shift Q to close that program. Alright, so I opened a terminal and I typed the command pacman space dash capital Q, and that lists all the programs installed by default on our system here. Any Arch-based system, that command would work. This is a very, very long list of every package, program, library installed on the system. But I'm going to take a quick look at this and point out a few things. So most of these are packages and libraries, not really programs that you guys are interested in on this video. Things like curl and Cairo and stuff like that. Dbus. We have Conky, of course. Conky was the system monitor that sits on our desktop. Really, we don't have a whole lot installed on here. Just looking through here, I mean, the GCC, the C compiler, for developers, this list is interesting. For those that are looking for more desktop-oriented programs, not much here. Gparted is installed. Hex Chat, for those of you that like IRC chatting, Hex Chat is installed. And I got to the L's in the list. So a lot of libraries. I'm just going to scroll down through all the libs here. We don't really care about any of that. LightDM, of course, was our display manager. Our Linux kernel is 4.14.14. That's the latest kernel. So a very recent kernel. Got Perl, PHP again. This is stuff developers would be interested in. You know, some Python stuff. Qt 5. Again, for those of you that are into development. Some systemd stuff. What version of systemd are we using? We're using systemd 236.81. The Terminus Font is installed. That is the font in our terminal. This blocky looking font is a font called Terminus. It's a really nice looking font, actually. Other fonts they have installed by default here is they have the Deja Vu font family, the Inconsolata font family, the Liberation font family is also installed. Vim is installed. Wayland is installed. Wayland 1.14.0. And then, you know, some Xorg stuff. Yowert is also installed on Manjaro I3 by default. And that is it. There's almost no graphical programs really to speak of, so there's really not much to review as far as that. So let me Control-Shift-Q to exit out of that terminal. I'll briefly show you how the default settings here for i3 work. So let me open up a terminal again. I'll open up a couple of terminals and I'll run a couple of programs in them. Let's launch HTOP. Let's launch Awesome Mixer because I know those two were installed by default. Alright. To get to a different desktop, mod key, the super key, 2 takes us to desktop 2. Mod key and 1 takes us back to desktop 1. We have 8 workspaces by default, at least on this version of Manjaro i3. So I could do super key 1, 2, super key 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, back to 1. Now say I want to move the HTOP window to the second workspace. Again, this is the first workspace that we open these on. So mod Control-Tube. No, that's not it. Let me see. Is that it? Mod Control-Tube. Yep, that sends it to the second workspace where it changes to full screen because it's the only window open. If I go back to workspace 1 with Super 1, Mod 1, Awesome Mixer still there. Now let me Super Shift 2. That sends it to the second desktop. I go to the second desktop. Well, I'm already at the second desktop. I guess we go with that window when we send it to the second desktop. So that's interesting. Again, I've never played around in i3. This is my first time looking at this stuff. So let me Super Shift Q to kill both those programs. The way a tiling window manager works, though, is you're supposed to write a config file and customize it to your liking. What I would have to do, I would have to install all the programs I like on this system because there's nothing really installed on it. I would have to go through that config file and set up all the key bindings for what I would want because I'm not used to the default key bindings that they've used here because I'm used to using my own set of default key bindings and other tiling window managers I use. I have certain key bindings that I always use. For example, I have a key binding that I always use to kill a window, also to kill the window manager itself to log out. I've got a key binding that I'm used to always open a terminal, to always open a browser, you know. And so I would have to go through that config file and set that up to my liking. And likewise, you guys would have to go through that config file and set it up how you want it. You know, nobody is going to config an i3 desktop or any tiling window manager desktop that pleases everybody. In fact, it's pointless to even try it. That's why you don't see a lot of distros out there that come with a tiling window manager installed by default, because by default they come with nothing. Basically, it's an empty desktop and a config file that you need to write yourself, and there's no point in somebody taking the time to write it for you because you're not going to like their config file. You're going to end up rewriting it and doing it yourself anyway. What do I think about Manjaro i3? Well, I quite like it. I've only spent a few minutes in i3, even just doing this video, so I'm not that familiar with it, but I'm familiar enough with tiling window managers. I'm sure I could live in i3 comfortably and be happy. For me, installing i3 on a machine, the reason I would do it is if I wanted to install a minimal install of Manjaro. You know, installing Manjaro i3 is a good way to go, even if you don't plan on living in the i3 window manager. It's not like i3, the window manager itself, is taking up a lot of hard drive space. I'm sure it's a very, very minimal program. So you install Manjaro i3, and then say you want to install something else. Like in my case, I would install maybe the open box window manager, or even a full-fledged desktop environment, maybe LXDE or LXQT. I mean, you can go that route, Enlightenment, whatever you want to do. So it makes sense to use the Manjaro i3 edition for a base like that if you want a really minimal install and then build on top of it. All in all, though, I really like Manjaro i3, just a little bit of time I spent in it. So check it out, guys. Peace.